Eros and Civilization, a fascinating book by a fascinating man about another fascinating man. The author of this book is named Herbert Marcuse, absolutely extraordinary character. The book is about Freud, and it is a philosophical analysis of Freud's work and how some of Freud's psychological theories can be observed on a societal scale. I want you to consider the ideas that we've spoken about before, about how society inherently oppresses us due to the fact that we have instinctive drives, and these instinctive drives are not compatible with the civilized order of our society. Well, what this book illuminated to me was something that I had not considered before, and that is that there is an internal psychology within all of us that mirrors the external societal oppression, and it is described as repression in Freud's psychological models. And Freud's models, of course, they are very strongly subject to criticism because they're unfalsifiable, but their utility cannot be questioned. So the repression that we see, of course, is that of the id, and that we have these instinctive desires that we want to have sex, of course, and just be an animal and get what you want and go after that, and then the next thing, and follow these drives. And then we have the ego that is overlaid on top of the id, of course, and the superego on top of the ego. That's like the most developed part of our brain. As such, notably, what's interesting is, I hadn't really considered this before, is the fact that these things are stacked up against each other. It seems, if we're to take this model for granted, that when we develop solutions to things psychologically, we're not really changing something that already exists. We are adding something on top of it. We're adding more and almost making it more complicated in order to make a solution. So if we are to take this psychoanalytic theory for granted, it would seem to imply that these instincts are deeply rooted inside of us and very, difficult to change because they've been with us for millions and millions of years. These processes that are internal to us have been passed down through the generations. So, maybe given evolution, if it was easy enough for us to just switch our brains such that we don't have these primitive urges and instincts, that would probably be the more feasible solution. But clearly that hasn't been able to happen in the short enough time that we've been living in civilized society. So we have the ego and the superego to accommodate that. But I was reading this and it really reminded me of a topic that I've covered before, and that is Camus' idea of absurdism, and more specifically the idea of nostalgia that he described in his book. And I sort of have equated this idea of Camus' nostalgia to Marcuse's and Freud's idea of the id being repressed. We have this nostalgia inside of us to want those repressed urges to blossom forth into existence, but we are unable to do so because of the internal repression that we have, because it is mirroring the external societal oppression that we face on a day-to-day basis. So Marcuse, of course, he's one of these writers from back in the day that's very idealistic, and his solution is, of course, to have the great refusal. And the great refusal is to say, no, society, you won't oppress me. And I don't really see how this is a feasible solution at all. I don't see what kind of institution would encourage this. It could be, you could have some sort of cultural movement, but it is a very sophisticated idea to have, spread, mainstream on the masses. And personally, I don't think you can just refuse the order of society. I think the order of society is very delicate and important. And if you just refuse it and say, oh yeah, we can make a new order, that almost always goes badly, as we see with communism in the 20th century. And anytime there's been a system that's been put into place, I haven't checked this, but I'm pretty sure this is true. I'll check it afterwards and maybe I'll correct myself, who knows. Anytime if somebody's been like, oh, I have a vision for a beautiful society and it'll be so good. These are literally the idealists, and idealists always make a mistake somewhere in their calculations because society is very complicated and we don't really understand the systems that are in place. The systems that we have are oftentimes emergent things that happen naturally, oftentimes without us not even really noticing what it was. We don't really understand the system of economics that governs our money. We don't really understand, cultural norms or anything. So I consider it very naive to think that you can just create a new society from scratch with new values and think that, oh, it's going to be perfect once we get there. This is just more, and this seems like a postmodern sort of trend. Just aspiring towards a liberated society. Wow, it would be so beautiful if everyone could just be happy and be awesome all the time. This is just not the way to think, in my opinion. So this is a very fascinating book, and I'm not saying that you should not read this. I actually would highly recommend you read this. It's very well written. The concepts are fascinating. It's a really cool blend of, sociology, psychology, philosophy. It's just that some of the solutions that are suggested are not really feasible, in my opinion. And there is actually one more memory I wanted to connect this to, and that is, I watched this documentary a while ago called Wild Wild Country about this cult that formed out in like Idaho or Washington or something. I don't remember the exact area, but it was way out in, the northern Midwestern area where nothing's happening really. This cult from India swoops in and like builds this like new society. And it's this crazy story. It's a really, really cool documentary. But the thing that really stuck with me is I remember one essential piece of the cult's process. And the thing about this process is these people, when they did this, they felt like they were a part of something really, really special. And these people, they were so passionate about the cult. And the thing that they did that stuck with me was they would go into a room together and they would just, let out all of their instinctive impulse. They would just scream and go like a total animal. And they would do that around each other. And I found it beautiful in a way and also a little bit disturbing, because at the end of the day, that these repressed things are inside, but to see them actually manifest, first of all, obviously it feels good, but whether that's actually a healthy thing for you to be doing, well, actually, in my opinion, I think personally speaking, that is actually a very healthy thing to do, to get out all of your repressed emotions. I would think, I don't know, I'm not a scientist on these matters, but I would think that that's a very healthy thing to do for your mental health. Mentally healthily speaking, at least. But if we're talking about societal health, I just don't know if that's the case. Or social health, I don't know if that is something that should be implemented necessarily. I think we have civilization for a reason, and civilization is supposed to be civilized. And what we see in the cult is just the gradual deterioration of the cult. The cult, starts getting guns and everything, and it just goes crazy. And these sessions that they have get more and more bizarre. So, you have this idea that you're just getting out all your repressed things, and after you get it all out, then it's all better. Well, maybe it's good for you in the short term, but eventually they're getting naked and they're like touching each other and groping each other and even having sex during these like sessions, just like weird group sex sessions. And you start to realize that maybe these animal instincts are not these things that you just get rid of altogether. Maybe it's more like you're giving into it and then it comes back stronger and it has more power over you. So, there's a lot of ways you can interpret this, and I'm just sort of freestyling here, but this is definitely a very significant topic and definitely relevant if you're looking to do something like Marcuse is suggesting, which is to just basically reject civilized expectations that are enforced upon you for the sake of being free or whatever. So I'm sort of leaning towards more of an absurdist idea where you can sort of maintain the expectation that you will be a civilized person, but at the same time, if you just do something silly, that sort of is an expression of that internal urge or desire. Like, the desire doesn't have to be the actual thing that you're desiring. I think you can like express yourself in ways that are silly and stupid, and that is like, basically what I'm saying is there's alternative forms of expression for these internal urges. And that's not to say that he's necessarily suggesting that. But we're just having a conversation here. Nothing is explicitly negative or positive. That's just stupid. That's not interesting. But that's what I was thinking about, and I wanted to share with you, and I would like to hear what you think in the comments too. So please tell me what you think. I'm curious. That's all.